Hi everyone. So you must have heard a lot of conflicting information about the H1b visa. On the one hand, local Americans complain that companies don't even bother hiring American workers, instead they go for cheap foreign labor. On the other hand, H1b workers complain that companies don't want to hire foreign workers but instead just go for American citizens and green card holders. What if I told you that they are both right? I'm going to explain how it all works using my experience as an H1b worker in the US. But before I get into it, let me give you a quick recap about my journey. I directly applied for a master's degree after graduating from undergrad in India. Then I graduated with a master's degree in computer science in 1.5 years. Now it was time to look for a job. Now, since I had a master's degree in computer science, I was allowed to work in the US as an international student for about 29 months. This period is called the OPT plus OPT STEM extension. So I didn't need a sponsor or anything. All I needed was an EAD or an employment authorization document to work for 29 months because I was on an F1 visa with a master's degree in a STEM course. Now, here's the important part to remember. The F1 visa is a non-immigrant visa, which means you're not supposed to show any intent of immigrating into the United States if you are on an F1 visa. This means I'm not allowed to apply for a green card. So if I do want to immigrate into the United States, the only option I have is to get an H1b visa. So when I started looking for a job, I had to make sure that the employer was going to sponsor my H1b visa eventually. Unfortunately, most jobs out there didn't want to sponsor H1b visa. This left me with very few choices for an employer, one of which was the infamous Desi consultancy. These Desi consultancies are also known as body shops. Anyway, long story short, I joined one of these Desi consultancies. I spent my 29 months as an OPT F1 student, and then after my period was over, I transferred to a H1b visa and I worked as an H1b worker for another 1.5 years. After 1.5 years on a H1b visa, I eventually decided to move on and return to India. I have another video describing why the H1b visa feels problematic and it feels like a slavery. I have the link to that video down in the description below. Check it out. Anyway, here's how these Desi consultancies work. There are a lot of companies out there that have some sort of an internal project going on. These companies could be anything. It could be a retail chain, it could be a mobile app, it could be a financial institution or an insurance company, anything. And all these companies have some internal project or the other going on. But the skills required for those projects can be very specialized. For example, I was an AngularJS developer, and there were very few projects in each company that I went to that specifically had an AngularJS project. Some of them had React in it, some of them had jQuery. Each of those projects had different pay requirements, different experience levels, and so on. To fulfill these temporary needs, companies hire contractors who specialize in these skills. But they don't want to sponsor an H1b visa for these contractors. However, it is these contractors that companies are short of. Companies want to hire more of these contractors, but they are not able to find as many as they need. Which brings us to how it all works. Let's call any company that needs something done the end client. The end client doesn't have the time or energy to look for contractors. So instead of looking for a contractor themselves, they hire a company to do it for them. This company is called the vendor. End clients can have any deal with the vendor, but mostly these clients offer vendors a certain hourly rate for each contractor they supply them with. It's these vendors who keep complaining about how they can't find enough talent to fulfill the jobs they have. As it turns out, they themselves don't have the energy and resources to look for those contractors. So what they do instead is that they subcontract this search to other companies, typically the Desi consultancy. So far, we have seen that neither the client nor the vendor is willing to sponsor an H1b visa. But the Desi consultancy does, in exchange for an even lower hourly rate. Since this Desi consultancy paid for my visa, it had a lot of power over me. It could get away with lacking benefits such as no paid leave, asking me to move to the client location every time there was a new gig, denying me a 401k, etc. Green card holders and US citizens, on the other hand, didn't need a visa sponsor like I did. This let them bypass these Desi consultancies and let them be hired directly by the vendor or the end client, getting a lot higher hourly rate in return. So here's what's going on. There are plenty of contracting jobs out there, but companies don't want to take the responsibility of making them as full-time employees. They don't want to pay for their benefits, they don't want to sponsor their visas, they just want to be able to hire and fire them willy-nilly, and they can do that only if they hire them as contractors. Also, these companies want to hire these contractors at a really low price. This puts both Americans and H1b workers like myself at a disadvantage. Citizens and green card holders don't want to be jerked around. They want stability, they want career growth, which means they are never going to go for these contracting jobs. The only ones who do go for these contracting jobs and are being able to be hired directly by the vendors and the clients are those who are super adventurous and extremely talented. These people are so talented they end up having YouTube videos, courses on Udemy, and might even run their own consulting companies on smaller scales. This leaves the majority of these consulting gigs that have to be filled fast and removed fast, to these companies. These vendor companies who want to find talent quickly, and the Desi consultancies who happen to collect this talent using the H1b visa program. Now you might be wondering, if these contracting gigs require some super talented developer for very specialized tasks, then how did I, a fresher from grad school, end up getting this consulting gig? The answer is fake resume. Now don't get me wrong, there's no fraudulent resumes being submitted to the Department of Labor or the USCIS or the Department of Homeland Security. No, all these government agencies under whom I filed the H1b visa has my actual genuine resume. Okay, this is the resume that I gave to my employer, and my employer, which is the Desi consultancy, decided to hire me based off this resume. So you might be wondering, who gets this fake resume then, and what exactly is faked in this resume? The answer is vendors, and it's all got to do with this broken recruiting process. Companies that are looking for contractors don't usually put a lot of thought behind what exactly they need in a contractor. This is usually because they are either running behind in schedule, or they have a really tiny project that they want to get done quickly. Vendors succumb to the pressure put on them by the clients, and then they end up doing a sloppy job writing the job requirements. Desi consultancies who get these sloppy job requirements from vendors don't have the time to argue with them. So these Desi companies, they end up taking the easy way out by writing a fake resume for me to give to these vendors. In any case, these vendors don't cross-check if these requirements are really fulfilled by the candidate. All they care is that this candidate is able to answer interview questions posed by the client. So I, a fresh grad who has no experience working with AngularJS, for example, claimed that I have 2 years of AngularJS experience, and I got a client interview. Now do note that the client never really needed an AngularJS developer. All they need is someone who's able to fulfill the requirements of that project. So this project that I was hired for basically was a patchwork. It was already a project handed to them from a previous company, and they are just trying to fix errors. Now you don't need an AngularJS expert to fix errors and bugs. All you need is someone who knows some basic programming. So After I gave out my fake resume and after I passed a few rounds of simple interviews, everybody ended up happy. The client ended up getting somebody to do some basic patchwork and bug fixes. I ended up getting a consulting gig, and everybody in the middle got an opportunity to siphon my hourly rate. So, what ended up happening finally is that instead of them getting the expertise they needed, they got the desperation from a candidate who could get the job done. Which means, on paper, I was an expert, but in practical sense, I was desperate. So the fact that I was an expert on paper and the fact that I was desperate in real life had to be kept separate. They couldn't be integrated and put together because of all the complicated requirements related to the H1b. Okay, so that's it from me. I hope I was able to explain this whole situation well enough about how the complicated nature of H1b disadvantages Americans, disadvantages the H1b holders, disadvantages even the companies that are looking for talent. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye.